Well, hello, welcome back. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock. And I must admit, my appetite is whetted. My desire to constantly talk about geopolitics and global security has been very stimulated by the death of Yahya Sinwar. I did a little jig around my holiday Riyadh, I must admit, and I was happily in the queue at the airport looking at all the videos, and my other half was nudging me in the ribs of his elbow going, "Don't do it, people might see what you're watching." But I was like, I don't care, I think this is brilliant. Anyway, what happens now? That is the big question. You've had Joe Biden saying this potentially paves the way now for a ceasefire, and Netanyahu's like, come on, old man. We're not talking about a ceasefire yet. The work has only just begun. But in the press conference announcing the death of Sinwar, he did say that this indeed could be the beginning of the end of the war. But he's insisting that, you know, the hostages must be released. Hamas must be destroyed. Is taking out Sinwar going to mean now that essentially, because not only was he an evil figurehead, he was the operational leader. So does this mean that that's going to be a block removed and there can be a more palatable negotiation, something that Israel might think is workable? Of course, he's meeting his war cabinet as well to discuss southern Lebanon. You've got Hezbollah saying, we are going to avenge the killing of Yahya Sinwar. I know, change the record. They want to avenge everything every 5 seconds. But where does this leave us? Is there now a chink of light at the end of the tunnel where we can actually see a path to something that could look a bit more like a settled situation in the Middle East? Well, I don't have the answer to that, but let's see if Sir Simon Mayall does, who's a retired British Army officer and former Middle East advisor at the Ministry of Defence. Simon, fantastic to have you on the show. Where do you think Netanyahu and Israel will go from here?
They'll be under quite a lot of pressure, Alex, as you well know, and they have been for a long time, to try and find some political solution. In many ways, one of the reasons, although I fully supported Israel's actions, and I'm as delighted as you that Sinwar has met his maker, there has been a lack of what is the politics at the end of this. I think calls for a ceasefire were totally premature while we dealt with both Hezbollah and Hamas. But undoubtedly the removal of Hinaya some time ago in Tehran, now the removal of Sinwar has created a very different situation. Sinwar was a very, very brutal basically dominator of Gazan politics. And he largely held not only the Israelis as hostages, but the Gazans as hostages as well. An organization depends on its capability, its leadership, its organization, and its ideology. I don't think the ideology has necessarily been crushed, particularly the sort of Palestinian side. But in terms of capability, Hamas has been shredded, and Hezbollah is being shredded at the moment. And you will notice all across the rest of the Middle East, not many Sunni Arabs are criticizing this. The big loser is probably Iran, who will be very, very worried to see its proxies being really eviscerated by the Israeli Defense Forces and the intelligence services.
Yeah, do you get the impression actually now that Israel are realising they're managing to achieve quite a lot, like you said, gutting out a lot of those terrorist proxies, at least of their leadership? One assumes that there'll be others lying in wait, although it seems to me they've got a shelf life which is much shorter than a bottle of milk. As the leadership and the structures are being completely disrupted in those proxies, despite the ideologies not disappearing, it is going to be a period of time before they were able to reassemble in any sort of meaningful way. But, I mean, does that actually leave any open ground for a political solution? I've always thought that the concept of this being some sort of territorial war with which a political solution can be found is for the birds. History seems to have shown us absolutely the opposite.
Yeah, I think your point is very well made, Alex. It's very difficult to see what the outline of a peace is. The first thing, undoubtedly, Netanyahu has made it very clear, release the hostages, and we suspect out of those 101, several are dead. I think we've got to be realistic about that. And then we can talk. I think it's the first time Netanyahu has actually said that and has offered some sort of olive branch. Yes, Sinwar's gone. Of the 42,000 dead in Gaza, as you well know, about half of them will have been Hamas fighters of one description or another, including a lot of the middle-ranking leadership and the junior leadership. And the same has happened to Hezbollah. The senior leadership have been absolutely beyond decimated. And the next generation below them have also been very heavily attrited. So this will be an interesting one. Who is prepared to have the confidence to say, it's over. Hamas is largely destroyed. We can fight this on. But we are now holding, against all the tenets of Islam, hostages, many dead, and we need to find a release. Now, if that happens, then you might hope, that the international community, the Americans, a lot of the Gulf states, other more, I use the term moderate very relatively, Palestinian leaders might look to salvaging something out of this that would be for the benefit of the Gazan people, for the Palestinian people. But it's the old cry in the Middle East, you've always got to get a bigger map. And a lot of this traces back to Tehran and Tehran's attempt to distract attention from itself by using its proxies like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, even though Hamas are a Sunni Muslim organization, as guardians of the Palestinian cause.
And do you think that actually now that Israel have effectively, massively weakened Iran's attack dogs via its proxies, Iran itself, other than the theatrics of sending a lot of missiles over and rockets over into Israel, which thankfully intercepted. I don't know whether their intention is for that to actually happen or not. I've never quite understood whether, when it comes to these big sort of shows of force, whether this is about saving face and optics or if they actually intend things to get through the Iron Dome. But do you think that this will be the moment that Israel says, well, look, you don't have your attack dog in Hezbollah right now. They've been massively weakened. You don't have your attack dog in the form of Hamas. The Houthis, busy disrupting maritime traffic. We're going to go ahead and strike your oil fields. We're going to target your nuclear bases, knowing that it puts them in a very difficult situation when it comes to retaliation.
Yes, again, absolutely right, Alex. The Iranian regime is quite brittle, quite divided. You have the Ayatollahs, you have the sort of, I suppose, the mainstream political organizations, you have the IRGC, you have the Basij on their side. And then you've got a number of insurgencies running. There's one in the Kurdish region, the Arabs in the south, although Khuzestan, although they're Shia, are rather disaffected. Baloch, you'll remember that bomb at the funeral of one of the IRGC leaders. Economically, they're very damaged. The inverted commas youth of the country are really peed off with, frankly, money being spent abroad. They are, they look at what's going on, the reform movements in Saudi Arabia, and quite rightly, the young women there and the young men say, if it can happen in theocratic Saudi Arabia, why isn't it happening in the great civilization of Iran? So Pezestan, forgive me, the new president there, is very conscious of the weakness of Iran, and Iran will always hunker down trying to defend itself. So this is an interesting time to put pressure on them collectively.
Well, I for one would think it'd be a smart move.
Yep.
And thank you ever so much for joining me. I would love to talk to you about this for hours and hours on end, but my time slot is somewhat limited. So Simon Mayall, their former retired British Army general and a Middle East expert